Good morning, Catherine. How are you? Hope you're on mute, I think.
I sure am. I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. I'm just going to make sure that you have access to everything you need to this morning.
Absolutely.
And if anything comes up, I will be here and monitoring, and I have tech
Great.
support around too. So we will formally begin here in about the next 10 minutes or so.
Excellent.
Okay, and Catherine, how familiar are you with Zoom and Zoom presentations?
Very.
Okay, excellent.
We did like 40 of them for a book festival, so.
Okay. So you have, I just made you a co-host, so you have screen sharing capabilities. I think you're the only one that I need to make a co-host this morning.
Dave will need to screen share as well,
okay,
yeah.
Becky and Dave, those two, let me do that right now.
And hello, Christina.
Hi, Catherine. How are
Dave,
you?
I see you there. Dave, you now have co-host abilities.
Okay, thanks.
And let's get down to Becky.
Becky is no longer joining us. She's actually traveling this week, so I'm just doing both parts for SCBWI.
All right, well, that's easy enough.
Catherine, are you two going to introduce yourselves?
Yes, I do have a little intro for myself and just very briefly say that I'll be turning it over to Dave later. So I'm not like formally introducing him.
Okay, so I'll be monitoring the chat for you for questions. Do you want them all at the end, or do you want them as they pop up?
I think you could do it. I think what worked with at least one of the keynotes yesterday, Ben interrupted the speaker and said this might be a good time to answer this question. So maybe watch for anything that you think is critical. Otherwise, I'd wait till the end. But yeah, certainly don't. You could interrupt and we could answer something on the spot if needed.
Okay.
Will we be able to see the chat, or is it a Q&A thing where they'll be sending questions in?
No, you should be able to see the chat as well.
Okay.
Once this starts, guys, I'll be going off screen, so I'll still be here and still be listening.
Okay.
And if anything comes up.
Excellent. And can I do a practice with my screen share for my PowerPoint to make sure it shows the actual thing and not all the notes? Sure. We had that problem with SCBWI a little while ago.
Would you like to do that right now?
Sure.
All right. Just hit stop share, and you go ahead and hit share on yours.
That looks good.
Cool. So it looks like it worked okay.
Excellent.
Excellent. Okay. And is my microphone okay? I kind of have it off to the side a little bit. It's one of those like big ball ones, but since I have notes in front of me.
Sounds good.
Sounds good on my end. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. And I will stop the screen share.
Okay. And I'll put the slide back up just so that people joining us aren't confused.
Sure. Yeah, and Dave, I'll leave that kind of intro slide up that I had while I'm kind of giving a brief introduction to me. And yeah, I'll say your first and last name then, since and I'm basically just saying that like I'll be turning it over to you later on. So
okay.
Thank you to both of you for doing this.
Oh, sure.
No problem.
I will stop my video and put myself on mute both, but I will be here as well. And
okay.
I'll keep an eye out on the chat.
Thank you.
Just message me or
Okay, I'm gonna mute as well, and then I'll be back in about 4 minutes, 2 minutes before we start, and we'll go ahead and make sure everything's good to go.
Great.
Thank you. And I do bring you up a couple times, actually, Dave, throughout the presentation, where I mentioned like, oh, and Dave will be talking a little bit more about his conference experience later, and I mentioned you're from Northern Ohio and stuff. So
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what you saw is basically the gist of what I have. I just cleaned it up a little bit, deleted a couple things. There was a couple points that I wanted to make, but it's about the same amount of slides. Hopefully it's not too long. I think I'm going to go through the front of it pretty quickly.
And I think actually mine might go a little quicker than I was thinking, since there was so much stuff to like that applied for SCBWI as a whole that I didn't need to repeat it for the local chapter.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So I think we'll be good.
We've got a little room. Is it?
Yeah,
This is an hour total?
I believe so.
10 to 11. Okay.
Yes, it is. And that's for questions as well.
Yes. Yeah. So
Okay.
1 hour for everything.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm hoping we'll have 10 to 15 for questions at least.
My presentation yesterday went a little quicker than I thought. I was done at 10:45, but there were a few questions, so it filled the hour.
Good. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share there, so you're on, and I'm going to stop my video as well, but I'll be hanging out for the duration.
Thanks, Dan.
Perfect.
Yep.
Should we give it a couple of minutes before we start, or are we ready to start now?
You can kind of ease into it. We still have 2 minutes, but looks like we have quite a few people already here. So.
Excellent. Cool. I'll just watch the clock then, and I'll start at 10.
All right, sounds good.
All right, we're just at 10, so I am going to go ahead and put up my screen share and we will get started. And let me see if I can pull up the chat real quick too. There we are. Okay, perfect. Well, hello everyone. Oh, I apologize. I'm going to turn off my work email real fast. I did not realize I still had that on. One moment here. Apologize for that. I did not realize it was on. Alrighty then. So hello everyone. I am so happy to be here today. I am Catherine Powers and I'm the regional advisor for the Central and Southern Ohio chapter of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And that is quite a mouthful, and we call it SCBWI for short. So I have been a member actually of SCBWI since 2008. And I just love this organization so much. It has taught me so much about the children's writing and illustrating industry. And I've met so many wonderful friends and colleagues just over the years, both locally in Ohio, as well as all across the world. So I became a regional advisor in February of 2020, which was, of course, just as the pandemic hit. So it's definitely been an interesting first year and a half of leading the Central and Southern Ohio region. So I'm really excited to tell you all about SCBWI today. And then I'll be handing things over to Dave Zalay, who is joining me. So he'll be popping on with a PowerPoint screen share as well. And he'll talk with you all about his personal journey to become a published illustrator, as well as how SCBWI helped him achieve his publishing goals. So, all right. So I'll begin by talking about what is SCBWI. So for anybody who's not familiar, SCBWI is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and it is a nonprofit professional organization specifically for individuals who write, illustrate, and translate for children and young adults. The mission is that we're here to support the shared journey of children's book creators with the goal to create and deliver quality and inclusive children's books all over the world. So some further info from the website is they also support published authors and illustrators as well through awards, events, and publications. We give established writers, illustrators, and translators the tools and resources to manage their careers as well as educate those just starting out. So a little bit about the history of the organization. So the organization was founded in 1979 by two co-founders, Steve Muser, who is now the president emeritus, and Lynn Oliver, who is currently the executive director. And they actually started it as the Society of Children's Book Writers. So it started in Los Angeles, but it is now worldwide. And actually, when I was looking at the stats, there are over 60 chapters in the US and 30 international chapters. And we'll get a little bit more to the chapters in a little bit. Authors Judy Bloom and Jane Yolen were on the original board and helped shape the organization. So a lot of really beloved children's creators were at the founding. and shaped the organization to what it is today. And then in 1991, Tommy DePaolo lobbied to officially include illustrators in the organization, and so the name changed to the current title, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. All right. And a little bit of membership information for everybody. So membership is open for anyone. So the official statement on the website says that membership to SCBWI is for anyone with an active interest in children's literature, from picture books to young adult novels. We welcome aspiring and published writers, illustrators, and translators, as well as librarians, educators, artists, students, dramatists, musicians, filmmakers, and others. So really, a passion for children's literature is the #1 criterion. And membership is actually also for all stages of the publishing journey, as well as what publishing avenues you might choose. So these include traditionally published, which are known as PAL members, which is short for published and listed. Independently published is another route, or not yet published, and those are known as associate members, plus students as well. And the student level is actually available to new members only. So it's not if you're going back to school. And it's so for new members only of SCBWI who are currently enrolled in an accredited college or university in the US or internationally. And prices do vary between the memberships. So those first 3 tiers, the traditionally independently published or not yet published, are $95 for the first year. And then it actually decreases after that. So the annual renewal price is $80. And then the student pricing is $65 for the first year, and then $55 for the renewal after that. And so here's when the local regions / chapters come into play. And those words are really used interchangeably in the SCBWI sphere. So when you join National SCBWI, you are automatically assigned to a local region based on your location. And the size of these regions varies a lot. Many states have 1 chapter for the entire state. Ohio happens to have 2 chapters, and that is Northern Ohio, as well as the Central and Southern Ohio chapter. Some states combine to form 1 chapter, like the Mid-South region is Kentucky and Tennessee. And the city of San Francisco actually has 2 chapters just for 1 city. So it really varies, just all across the United States as well as the world. So membership benefits. And boy, are there a lot of benefits for SCBWI. So one of the first benefits I wanted to talk about is exclusive publications. So, and one of these is the book, and the other is called The Bulletin. The book, which is subtitled The Essential Guide to Publishing for Children, is really just that. It is a huge resource chock full of everything you would ever want to know about publishing a children's book in the kidlit world. It's also updated regularly and has a huge variety of information on traditional publishing, indie / self-publishing, marketing, critique groups, school visits, creating book trailers, social media tips, and so much more. It's pretty much your go-to document for anything you would ever want to know about publishing. So you have access to it digitally when you become a member, and that's as soon as you become a member. But you can also order a hard copy that you can pay and have sent to you. So, and additionally, SCBWI has a magazine that comes out quarterly called The Bulletin, and that's what is on the left side of the screen right there. And this is a magazine publication that features industry news, articles, market reports, and all sorts of good stuff like that. And SCBWI also pays writer members for articles and illustrator members for spot art. So it's a fun way to get your name out there and a publication credit too. You can receive this magazine either physically or digitally, and members also have access to all the back issues virtually, which is some 200 issues at this point. So it's really a lot of great content that can keep you busy for a long time. All right, there's also annual awards and grant and scholarship opportunities. So there are a lot of award opportunities through SCBWI, both for published members, unpublished members, indie pub, just as well as scholarship opportunities as well. So some of the award opportunities include the Golden Kite, which is SCBWI's longest standing award since 1973, and it recognizes excellence in the children's literature categories of young reader and middle grade fiction, young adult fiction, nonfiction text for young readers, nonfiction text for older readers, picture book text, and picture book illustration. And then a sister award for that is the Crystal Kite Awards, which are peer-given awards recognizing great books from 15 SCBWI regional divisions around the world. And then there's also up here in the corner on the right is the Spark Award, and that recognizes excellence in children's book publishing through a non-traditional publishing route. And there are also just so many awards. There's the Sid Fleischman Humor Award, the Tommy DiPaolo Award for Emerging Illustrators, and many more. And additionally, there are lots of grant opportunities and scholarship opportunities for members, and those are given on an annual basis for writers and illustrators, published and pre-published. And they include things like a work in process grant, student writer and illustrator scholarships, emerging voices, mid-list authors, and underrepresented voices. So there we are. So also for published members, there's lots of benefits for them as well. So even if you don't need all the information, or, meeting editors and agents, maybe you already have an agent, or have multiple books out or anything, SCBWI is still a great organization for you as well. And they have many perks for published authors. So these support opportunities include things like the SCBWI Book Stop, which is an annual program where members create special sales pages on the SCBWI website for newly published books around the holiday season. And there is also a new, and this has been a fun program for everybody, it's a Happy Book Birthday program, which lets authors celebrate and promote a new book the month it is released via a designated page on the National SCBWI website. And there is also SCBWI's recommended reading list, which has times designated around the year for both traditionally and non-traditionally published books. And so members can have their books included on these lists, and they're distributed by SCBWI to independent bookstores and libraries across the country, as well as conferences such as ALA and NCTE. So really, there's just so many things that you get with your membership. And additionally, there's lots of freebies too. So your membership includes things like podcasts, and throughout the pandemic, one of the things they've really been great about is offering a series of virtual workshops. They actually are up to their 4th slate of those, and they're still going strong. So I foresee them doing more of those in the future, since everyone has enjoyed them so much. All right. Another big part of SCBWI and a benefit is conferences. So these are some of the artwork from some of the conferences that have taken place over the years. So another benefit through SCBWI is that members get reduced pricing to all SCBWI conferences, workshops, and events at both the national and the regional level. So, and that's through all regions. So if you are an Ohio member, say, and sign up for a Nevada event, you would pay the reduced SCBWI member price. So that's, good through all regions. The 2 big conferences that National SCBWI puts on annually are the annual winter conference in New York and the annual LA conference in the summer. And people always joke that it's, funny that you would go to the nice place in the summer and the super cold place in the winter, because probably people would enjoy going to LA a little bit more in the winter. But they always have a really good time as well. I've never been to the New York one. I'd love to go someday, but I've been to the LA one a few times, and it's always a great time. And actually, these are both long-standing conferences, and the summer conference is coming up very soon, just at the end of July. And it is the big 50th anniversary event. So do be sure to check that out on the SCBWI website. And everything is virtual still right now, but they're hoping that hopefully winter and maybe next summer we'll be able to be in person again. So, and then for anybody who's never been to a conference before, a little bit about them is that, so why they're so great is that it's a fantastic opportunity to meet agents, editors, art directors, and other published authors and illustrators, many that you wouldn't usually get to see on a normal basis. Most conferences consist of several keynotes, breakout sessions, critiques, and intensives with faculty, and lots of socializing. So it's definitely a wonderful place to meet new friends and critique buddies. Additionally, some regions host conferences as well, and workshops and panels and things of that nature. One of the great things about the pandemic actually is that since events were all forced to move online for a virtual format, attendance opened up to anyone around the world. So that's been really great. I don't even know how many online events I've attended this past year and a half because they're just going on all the time, and it's been so wonderful to be able to do things with California and Maryland. I did something with them, and they're just so many. Texas, and you can just do it from the comfort of your own home and your own pants and your bunny slippers. So so there's actually a page on the national website that does list all of the online events that are going on throughout the regions. So be sure to check that out. All right. And the most important benefit of all is camaraderie. So SCBWI gives you a community of peers, mentors, shoulders to cry on, and kindred spirits. And it really is the best place to find like-minded souls for just other kidlit authors and illustrators who love the same things you do and want to make good books and put them into the hands of children. All right, and that brings us to SCBWI's commitment to equity and inclusion, which is of course a very important topic. Let's see here. So I'm going to go ahead and read the statement. So this is the commitment to equity and inclusion that is both on the national and regional level. Everybody in the leadership positions in SCBWI is committed to equity and inclusion. So I'm going to read the organization-wide mission and pledge. So at SCBWI, we recognize that publicly committing to equity and inclusion is crucial to our membership and the readers we serve. Words, stories, and images are powerful. They define who we are for ourselves and for others. We accept the challenge and responsibility of becoming agents of change by affirming the need for increased representation in every facet of the children's and YA book industry, including, but not limited to, race, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, gender and gender identity, including gender expression, socioeconomic status, caste, geography, citizenship, body size, veteran status, and religion. And further, to fulfill our mission of supporting the creation and availability of quality books for every young reader in all regions of the world, we commit to championing equity and inclusion throughout the organization by striving to identify and dismantle inequities within our policies and practices, expand inclusivity in our leadership, membership, and volunteer corps, increase the social consciousness of our members through substantive learning opportunities, continually examine and renew that commitment in our events, programming, online initiatives, publications, awards and grants, community outreach, and education efforts. And as creators of books for children and teens, we have both a unique responsibility and a powerful opportunity to help young people create an equitable, inclusive world. And SCBWI, throughout the entire organization, all the leadership looks forward to listening, learning, and leading. So, and that actually brings us to the SCBWI in your own backyard. Oh, I apologize. I didn't have that last one. So if you do want to learn more about SCBWI's equity and inclusion efforts and initiatives, you can visit their page on the website, and it has lots of really wonderful information about what they are doing for that role in the publishing community. All right, so I'm gonna take a sip of water here. So A Tale of Two Chapters. As I mentioned earlier, Ohio is divided into 2 local regions. And those are, and I think my notes got out of order here. One sec. Here we are. All right, sorry about that. So when you join National SCBWI, as I mentioned earlier, you're automatically assigned to a chapter based on your location. So there are 2 chapters in Ohio. The Central and Southern Ohio chapter oversees Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, and Southeast Ohio. And Northern Ohio oversees Cleveland, Toledo, Akron, Youngstown, and really pretty much anything north of Columbus is their territory. For anyone in the audience who isn't from Ohio today, you can learn about your local region and what sort of activities they hold on the National SCBWI website at scbwi.org. I've got that at the bottom there. There's even a nice tab that says local chapters where you can find all the regions in one handy place. And programs and activities actually do vary from region to region. So some regions focus on conferences and they'll hold a really big conference each year. Some do monthly meetings, some run mentor programs, others run regular critiques on critique groups on a regular basis. So it really does vary from chapter to chapter. But regardless of what they do and where they are located, all SCBWI chapters are run entirely by volunteers. So yep, that means I am a volunteer too. And I just, love the kidlit industry and especially the Ohio community so much, which is why I love dedicating my free time, my volunteer time to the organization. So, and not to brag, but Ohio definitely has the best SCBWI chapters in the organization. Just saying, Dave is part of the Northern Ohio chapter, and I'll briefly just say that they do a really lovely annual conference plus virtual critique nights. They do illustrator events and workshops and just lots of good things. So whether you live in the Northern Ohio area or Central and Southern Ohio, you have a great kidlit community to call your own. All right, what we do here in Central Ohio, well, Central and Southern Ohio. So one of the main things that we focus on for the Central and Southern Ohio chapter is that we hold monthly meetings. So pre-pandemic, we would host local meetings every month in Columbus, Cincinnati, and Dayton. So that equaled 1 meeting per city every single month. Dayton only started meeting regularly just a few months before the pandemic, but Columbus and Cincinnati have been following that format for years and years, probably since they came into existence. Of course, then COVID-19 came along. So during the pandemic, we switched formats, and instead of doing separate meetings for the cities, we do a virtual meeting for the entire region each month. And these consist of speakers, panels, demonstrations, and casual region-wide critique nights. All of these meetings are free and open to the public, so anyone can attend even if they aren't a member. And since we are kind of peeking our heads out of, social distancing and quarantining and everything, so going forward, we're not entirely sure yet what the format will be. For our meetings, we'll say meetings online has been really positive for people in the area who don't live near the bigger cities, as well as folks who have family, work, and other obligations or conflicts during the usual evening meeting times. So it's been really nice to bring them into the programming. But naturally, many members also miss the in-person meeting format too. So we're currently noodling over what will be fair to everybody, and it will likely be a hybrid model going forward that probably alternates between the virtual and the in-person meetings. And what other things do we do? So in addition to our monthly meetings, we also do weekend workshops, which feature a variety of topics and professional speakers. We've had lots of these on tons of topics, such as manuscript submission processes and tips, graphic novels, query letters and pitches, craft topics like plot and pacing, and illustration topics. And just last summer, we did a great workshop with Dave Zalay himself, the very talented. And he gave us a wonderful presentation on how to craft a winning portfolio. We've also done some larger workshops. That's actually in the picture on the left, where we had an agent come in and two of the authors that he worked with. So we really enjoy bringing in the publishing or faculty from publishing houses and agencies. And it's been really fun to have these kind of half-day workshops, full-day workshops, where the faculty all know each other. It's been really fun to do that because they have such a, camaraderie. So this one was Agent Brent Taylor and two of his clients who got to come in for the event, and it was a lot of fun. So, and then we also took advantage of the pandemic and the virtual format to try some new things over this past year and a half. One of these was, it started out as a 2-part workshop for illustrators, where one part, or part number one, was a workshop with an art director, and then an assignment was given to everyone to work on for a few weeks. And then in part 2, there was a live critique of all the assignments by the art director. And people enjoyed it so much that we ended up having a spontaneous part 3 where people wanted to revise their illustrations based on feedback. So we did that and scheduled a part 3 and did another round of critiques. And that one was really neat. We had, that was our most worldwide event that we've done. We had people from Europe and Asia, and it was really, really wonderful. So we really love planning events that are both fun and meaningful for the members, and we always have something cooking. So additionally, we do 2 monthly critique groups. One is for picture book writers, which is the second Wednesday of each month. And one is for illustrators, which is the first Tuesday of each month. And those just started, the illustrator one just started a few months ago. So, and those are specifically for SCBWI members. So those you have to be a member to go to the smaller critique groups. And we also maintain a critique database for members who want to find critique buddies or groups. So that's been really neat that people can kind of take a look at that list and find some people who they want to swap manuscripts with. And then we also do things like contests for illustrators with judges from publishing houses. And that lovely illustration that was on the very first slide was an illustrator from our chapter who did a social media banner. We do those as well, where we kind of rotate them. So we try to have lots of good things for both writers and illustrators. And then we also do social events with mingling and mixers and some outdoor writing, illustrating when we can, when the Ohio weather is being agreeable, and field trips. The field trips are really fun. We actually, in close to the end of 2019, even got to carpool up for a visit to the Mazza Museum. So that was wonderful. So you can easily see we keep ourselves busy and we keep our members busy too. So, and here is some of our SCBWI members. So this is just a small sampling of authors and illustrators from both chapters in Ohio, including some of the past and present regional team leaders and volunteers. We are just always so proud of the great books that our SCBWI members put out into the world, and it's especially rewarding when we can help someone go from a kidlit newbie to a published author and illustrator. And you will see Dave Zalay has a book up there too. His is the true story of Zippy Chippy. All right. So if you're interested in writing and illustrating for children, we hope you'll check out our fantastic organization. It is such a wonderful, supportive, and dedicated community, and we would love to have you join us. So for more information, here are the websites for National SCBWI, as well as the Central and Southern Ohio team and the Northern chapter as well as Facebook pages and Twitter and the email for the Central and Southern Ohio chapter. You can always find us on social media, and really if you have any questions at all about anything Kidlit related or SCBWI, do email us anytime. So thank you all so much. And now I'm going to turn things over to Dave.
All right. So let's do a screen share. Cheers. Okay, we good? Set up? Okay. All right, so I was
It's up.
asked. What's that?
I was just saying, yep, it's up.
Okay, good. Thank you, Catherine. So Catherine asked me to participate. We're friends through the association, through the where we meet between the north and southern portions of Ohio. We've met at different conferences and things, and I was asked to describe my journey to publishing, and I thought about that. How would I frame that? One way would be it seems like a very quick kind of overnight success story, but it's never that. It always looks like that to the public. I joined in 2014, but I want to talk about all the things that led up to me getting into this, because I certainly didn't start out in this field. And as I talk about these things, maybe you can think about some parallel experiences that you've had or parallel interests that you've had. And I would call those, defining moments that we have throughout our lives that lead us to certain career paths and things like that. My wife is a social worker, and she works in child welfare, and she had one of her childhood friends, her mother was a social worker. So, something like that typically triggers your interest in a vocation. All right, so this is my studio. I live in Richfield, Ohio. We live near the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, so it's pretty, it's scenic. It's not where I grew up though. Moved here in 2013. This studio is, a later in life achievement. I certainly never had a place completely dedicated to working at home. I've been through several phases of my career that I'll describe to you. One thing you'll notice over underneath the clock, there's a little letter there that I'll refer to later from Dr. Seuss. That was kind of one of those defining moments. This is my granddaughter, who's 4, so she's kind of a good test market for my books. I started working, it's interesting, I started working just a year or two before she was born in this field, and she's kind of grown up right along with me. And it's an interesting thing, because I have 2 adult kids, and we're not, looking at children's books as often or we wouldn't be as often as we did back then. So I was raised in Akron, Ohio, in the very industrial area, born in the 60s, went to public schools in the 70s. I had a very vivid imagination. I wasn't a very good reader. I don't have a diagnosis, but I had trouble reading. I just, back then they weren't as specific as they are now in education. And I have some form of challenge that made me gravitate towards picture books. And I remember a couple defining moments as a kid. My art teacher kind of identified me as someone who had a affinity for drawing. And then I had a 5th grade teacher who also identified me as somebody who was doodling a lot while I was supposed to be paying attention to the lessons. So I was one of those kind of daydreamer kids. I didn't do well academically in school. It wasn't a reflection on intelligence. And I think there's a lot of creative people that can identify to that. My grandmother was a bookseller. She worked for a local department store, and she filled my bookshelves with Beatrix Potter and Dr. Seuss and a lot of the classics that sort of molded my childhood picture book experience. Again, I was hopping through picture books as someone who responds more to visuals than to the written part. So those kind of things, I think that if you don't get help, you sort of find ways of overcoming it. In 3rd grade, I won this award that was a contest that my art teacher submitted my work to, and it was the American Dairy Council, and it was a poster about drinking milk and getting enough calcium and all that stuff. So that, I call that a defining moment, because I was recognized for my art ability at a very young age, third grade being 1974. So that trophy sits along with all my professional awards up in my bookshelf in my studio. I think it's one of the things that started, and I had my little 30 seconds of fame when I was in the Akron Beacon Journal. I'm there on the right side with my 1970s style. And that poster where I drew it says "Stand Straight," that's the poster that I won the award for. So that was a pretty meaningful, memorable thing that happened. Didn't really, I struggled with school. I struggled with traditional schooling. So I wasn't sure what I was going to major in. I was interested in sciences and math, and that certainly wasn't going to happen. But I did discover the art department at the University of Akron, and I went there just to explore. And I had some family friends who were commercial artists for places like Goodyear and department stores, O'Neill's department store. So I kind of knew that there was something out there pre-computer days that had to do with drawing, but I didn't understand much about that. So through the 80s, I was, kind of learning about commercial art, and I developed my commercial skills and knowledge and some leadership ability. I worked at some internships. I learned about commercial illustrators, fine arts, and history. I don't believe I stepped foot in a fine arts museum until I was probably in college. Didn't grow up in a very cultured environment, kind of a blue collar environment. I learned early technology. It was just at the point when I was just getting out of school where the Apple computers were coming in and desktop publishing was a thing. And then I also read a very pivotal book to me, The Illusion of Life, which is the art of Disney animation, which was written by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson. It was a big 500-page book. So for me, being a struggling reader, that was a huge accomplishment. And it kind of set the stage for me being interested in visual storytelling. A little bit after college, I was graduating with a BFA in graphic design. I did very well in college, by the way, just not so well K through 12. I wrote a letter to Dr. Seuss when I was about 20 years old, and I said, thanks for inspiring me to be an artist and to draw and to use my imagination and to learn to read. And I hoped someday that I could inspire kids, to read as you did for me. And he wrote this letter back to me. This is probably about 4 years before he passed away. So that's been framed and hanging around whatever creative workspace I've had over the decades. This was that book, and which I keep on my bookshelf. This is the kind of work that I did after graduation, after college. I did advertising, marketing, newspaper ads and flyers and things like that. I was coming into contact. This cartoon on the top is George Booth, who is known as a New Yorker illustrator. He's a big time cartoonist that works in New York City, and he's in the New Yorker often. But anyway, this Goodyear ad, I worked on national campaigns. This was something that would have ran in the newspapers in Hawaii, actually. So I did a lot of West Coast stuff from Akron at an agency, and I learned about production, print production, mechanicals, taking what I learned in college and applying it to the real world and getting things out there in newspapers and ads and billboards and things like that. This is how I drew when I was in college. Pre-digital, it was markers. And my task as a graphic designer was mainly to draw just for placement. So we would do these illustrations, and they were never meant to be seen by the public. They were actually just layout tools, so we could use them to direct the photographers for these ads. And but I kind of developed my chops back then, working with traditional colored pencil and things like that. So, and later on I worked at an exhibit design company where I would do these very technical, not very, they don't look like children's book illustrations, but I developed these technical skills of drawing and drafting. And again, more defining moments as I'm moving through my 20s. I worked my way up to as an art director, did lots of national advertising stuff. Again, here's a sample of laying out a catalog that would go out monthly for Cargo Express, which was like a kind of a Bed Bath & Beyond that was owned by Joanne Fabrics, which is headquartered in Ohio. I was a corporate art director, and I laid out these catalogs in line drawing up on the top left, and then they would go to the photographer as visual directions on how to shoot the photography for those ads. So I was a layout artist, an art director. I was also an art director for the Cleveland Physician magazine, so I developed covers every month, and I did things like the advertisements for the Cleveland Opera, a lot of hospitals and museums. So these are the things, as I was growing as a young professional, that I was doing that didn't relate directly to children's books, at least not, I didn't think they did, but understanding how things are printed and how to prepare files and work with inks and assembly of mechanical, files for print production, because you're creating books. That was very, very valuable. So I had this innate or inherent knowledge that I didn't realize that every illustrator didn't have in our field. In the mid-90s, I decided to go out on my own. I worked my way up to vice president of creative services at a printing company, and I oversaw the design and marketing. And I felt that I had kind of hit the ceiling, and I really wanted to be, try a run on my own. So this was a defining moment because I chased a big dream. I actually made it happen. I didn't sit in my cubicle and say, oh, what if I was self-employed? I actually decided to go out on a limb, put the house up for collateral to get a business loan. And it was just a huge leap of faith. Self-employment was a big deal because I was learning the ins and outs of trying to survive as a freelancer. And also branding myself and getting myself out in front of people. All of these important networking skills really helped me later on when I was interested in publishing. And then I decided at that point, technology was changing rapidly. And it was just still in the early phases of designers and illustrators working on the computer. In fact, illustrators at this point weren't doing anything digital. There were no tablets or digital pens. But again, preparing files and things like that was really invaluable. And I learned that I would never, college was becoming obsolete at this point. The knowledge that I gained in college was becoming outdated. So I realized that I'd have to be a lifelong learner to survive in the field that I was going into. And I had to take chances. So I never really sat back and became comfortable with whatever my expertise was, because if I did, it would become obsolete fairly soon. So in 1995, I went out on my own. I opened this company, Zalay Design Associates, and we were a visual communications company. We did website design. That's me as a young 30-year-old with my studio. I had a few employees. I had a big investment in computers and renting commercial space. Did fairly well. I did, if anybody is from the area, I did one of the big projects I did was this giant, it's the Hall of Earth and Space Geology at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. Again, digital, I was creating these digital layouts that are mural size, and it was informing how I would eventually in the future work with children's books. So this is basically like a gigantic textbook that you walk into at the museum. It's very, very, very outdated now because that was in 1999 or so. So everything has changed, including the knowledge that we have about space. But it was a huge, huge learning experience for me. My company did packaging design for a global installation company. We worked with, again, hospitals and museums. This is a Portage Parks district. I drew things like maps, and you can see a little bit of botanical art in the background there. So I really, was using exactly what I learned in college, and I was self-employed and had my own client list. The economy crashed after 9/11. That's, it was as blatant as the pandemic we're going through. So for small business owners, everybody who would hire us pulled back and didn't send work out to small studios. So my company really was just hanging on by a thread. I downsized it back to being an independent freelancer, went back into my home, got rid of my commercial space, helped all my employees get jobs. And then I talked to one of my former professors at the University of Akron. I ran into him at Starbucks and I said, hey, do you need any teachers? Because I was kind of in transition again. And blindsided by that, economic downturn. And so he said, yeah, we're really desperate for teachers. So that was 2004, the winter of 2004. I started teaching right away in January in 2005 and teaching graphic design classes. I wasn't doing illustration yet. I liked it. And as I was going to school, I decided to go to grad school and get a master's degree in case a full-time professorship opened up. So I got a master's in communications in about 2.5 years. International public relations and communications. I landed a tenured position a couple years later after somebody retired, luckily. I was very fortunate because they do national searches for those positions. And I became a full-time educator. And it was around that time that I decided that I felt like graphic design was still viable, but I felt like I was kind of at my peak, and I decided there was a missing link at our program. There wasn't a big illustration component. A lot of kids like to draw and paint coming out of high school. So I decided that I would invest in myself and go back to grad school one more time and get a second degree, a Master's of Fine Arts in Illustration. And I chose the University of Hartford in Connecticut because down there in the picture on the lower left, the gentleman in the center is Murray Tinkelman, who's a legendary iconic illustrator who worked in the 50s and 60s, and he was basically connected to the world. He's somebody who did do children's books. He also knows everybody in the children's book field. My advisors there, the guy I'm on the far right, the guy that's got his arm over my shoulder is Bill Thompson, who actually has art represented in the Mazza Museum. Bill is the guy who told me about SCBWI when I was in school between 2010 and 13 in Hartford. And that's the first time I ever heard of it. It took me about 6 years to figure out what those, to actually say Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. I was, like everybody does, I was twisting around all the words because it's a long acronym. And but I knew Illustrator was at the end of it someplace. So there was a place for me. And some of my professors, I certainly didn't learn how to illustrate in grad school. What they do is they help you find your signature style. They help you find your visual voice. My visual voice was advertising, and it was very technical. It wasn't kid friendly. So I spent those 3 years learning about the field, reinventing and retraining, and also building a network in the children's book field. Lifelong learner. This is one of my first pieces that I did in graduate school. First time I painted on the computer using a stylus and a digital thing. So I could draw, this took a long time. I would do something like this now in a day. That took me about a week of trial and error. These are the kind of pieces that I did in school. So you could see it wasn't a children's book program, but we could choose our own path. And I started gravitating towards children's books. I felt like storytelling was a calling. This is another set of pieces that I did. This started giving me a portfolio. My first, so after graduation, a year after graduation, I joined SCBWI Northern Ohio in 2014, and I went to the first regional conference, met some friends. Primarily, the important person that I met was Laurent Lynn of Simon & Schuster. That's a pretty big person to meet your first, minute in this society. You meet people who are movers and shakers in the field. SCBWI really opens doors. It's a vehicle. It's not that you couldn't work in this field without SCBWI, but for somebody who knew very little about, I was a consumer of children's literature as a father and a grandfather, but I wasn't a creator. And I didn't know the ins and outs. I didn't know how agents work. I didn't know how editors and publishers work. I was close, but I didn't know the specifics of this field. And that's where things started to happen. So I decided a little bit later I went to the 2014 and 15, skipped 16, the regional conference, but I decided to go to the national one in New York. And at that point, I had a portfolio of the things from college that you saw. Didn't have much else. I showed my portfolio in the big show. I think there's 200 or 300 portfolios from all over the country that are shown, and art directors come through and editors, and they look for new talent. I put a stack of postcards out, and a lot of them were taken, which is a good sign. And I didn't have this style. So when I talk about signature style, this is kind of where I am today. These are pieces from Highlights magazine, and from the other one's a subsidiary of Highlights, one of the younger books. I also had to mention down below, I started acting like a professional illustrator. So I went to all types of illustration conferences, including the Icon conference. And that's Sophie Blackall, who did The Lighthouse. She's a Caldecott winner, and she also did Finding Winnie. Those are two of my students. So I started, breathing this back into my teaching and my practice, so that all the worlds were kind of mixing together. This is more Highlights and Cricket magazine. Oh no, these are both Highlights. I just want to mention, I brought these up as reminders to you that even if you don't do books, there's a lot of fantastic children's publications, magazines that you can get published in. And some people, and you're also, as an illustrator, I'm working with great writers, and these writers are also submitting poems. So it seems overwhelming to say, oh my gosh, I have to write a children's book and illustrate or illustrate all these things. You don't have to do that. You can kind of walk before you run. And this is a great way to test out. And I still do work for Highlights several times a year. I also still do commercial illustration, and you can see that this is very different from the early days. I have a business kind of application on the left with the little brochure, and on the right, those are editorial illustrations for a medical magazine. So you can see how my style has kind of developed. And then in 2017, I entered the portfolio show every year. I felt like, as an illustrator, I'm going to New York and I will enter it. And I was picked up by the CAT agency out of Connecticut, and Christy Ewers over there on the left, her mom started the agency and she has taken over since. And so if you go to the CAT agency website, you'll see about 70 illustrators from all over the world that our agency represents. So that felt like overnight. You can see that there's 30, 40 years in front of this. And then all of a sudden, joining SCBWI, things started to happen. Now, when you enter these things, it doesn't mean you're automatically going to get an agent. But I do think that I had some tools to rely on that helped me be a good presenter of my work and also catch some attention. The next year, I won one of the portfolio honor awards. And again, it doesn't mean that I'm going to automatically get snagged up and published, but these are all, they're pivotal moments. And I think that that's part of what the lesson is just put yourself out there. You've got to get your work in front of people. And for me, I have these nice accolades to brag about, but I also have a lot of failures that that helped me get to this point. This is from one of my books. This is how my portfolio looks when I take it to New York. This is from the Superlative Abraham Lincoln, published by Charles Bridge. These are some other pieces, a Highlights piece. And then again, on the right, advertising. That's advertising for Amish country down in Holmes County. And my children's book style, I apply it to other fields just to keep everything rolling. I have this huge network. I know people on the national stage that are, well-known published illustrators and authors that are like celebrities to me. I branded myself. You can see my logo and my portfolio and my postcards so people know who I am. My Hungarian name is pronounced Zalay, so I broke it up into 2 syllables to help people kind of memorize it. I do lots of lecture, being a college professor, of course, I'm on stage every day for at least 30 weeks a year, but I also get out and speak at museums and there's a portfolio presentation, how to build a strong portfolio that Catherine mentioned. This is me doing a version of that up in the top right. I don't know why my hand's always up like that. Apparently that's how I cast spells and make magic, but I consider myself a bit of a historian. I really, really did a deep dive in illustration history and children's book history, and so often museums and organizations will call me in to do keynote speaking. So up there is the Akron Art Museum, and I'm doing a talk about Ed Emberley and process. So this is weird because I usually just talk about process. I don't usually talk about my history, but I'm very comfortable in front of audiences. And I think that getting yourself out, I'm essentially an introvert. So getting myself out in front of people and being able to talk, I sort of put on a new persona, but it has opened doors. Everything, see, my graphic design experience helps me prepare very good cohesive marketing stuff. So these are postcards that I would take to an SCBWI conference, for example. This is another promotional piece. This one's pivotal because we did this as an agency level postcard where we have a prompt, and SCBWI is really good about giving prompts, giving you ideas to draw, do an exercise with. This one is from our agency, and it was, the prompt was, for me, it was, I wanted to put dogs in my portfolio. So I did this retro piece. Now this portfolio piece has some it has a long shelf life. So a couple years later, HarperCollins saw this postcard. They'd received it from my agency. Somebody at the publisher pinned it up on their board and said, we want to work with this guy. And I just got a book recently based on that postcard. Here's another one. This is a front and back of a postcard. So demonstrating kind of graphic novel style. So I do a lot of work that is just sort of demonstration. I had to build a portfolio. I didn't have an illustration portfolio. Here's another piece, a prototype book cover of a story that doesn't exist, but I could certainly put that together. One thing about SCBWI is when we talk about associate members who aren't published, a word that I like is that if you're not a published illustrator, but you want to be, they call you a pre-published illustrator, which I think is a really nice way of looking at this. And I think of myself as a pre-published writer as well. I have several manuscripts that are being shopped around. I haven't been published as a writer yet, but I'm really close and I'm getting great feedback and great response. So for me, my next level is, instead of just doing illustrations for other people's books, I want to actually pen the story and have my own piece. But in the meantime, I have 3 books out: The True Story of Zippy Chippy, Travel Guide for Monsters, and The Superlative A. Lincoln, which are all written by other authors and different publishers. Up at the top left, I'm at the Mazza Museum on Findlay. Before pandemic, these books came out like right during the pandemic, so I barely got them out there. But this is that book that I was talking about that HarperCollins hired me for. It's a story of William Wilgus. And this is how I do my sketches, just showing you the level of art that I'm at now. I will draft out the entire book in a storyboard format, get approvals or edits, and then I go back and I do the color paintings. So this is this book that's going to be, this was actually postponed for publication until 23, or 23. It was going to come out in 22. So I'm in the middle of working on that. And this is my portfolio. This is the branding, that I keep. It has my agent on there. There's my handles in case you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, and my website is my name, daveszalay.com. So that's it. And I think all of that is part of the thing. Even if you don't have any of this stuff, I think you kind of have to fake it till you make it. So you have to build a portfolio. If you're a writer, you have to build samples. You've got to get them out there. I recommend, instead of tackling a giant picture book, that you tackle something small, like a poem or two. Just get stuff out there and get feedback. SCBWI offers you so many opportunities to get peer critiques, get things in front of art directors and editors and people that will hire you, the decision makers. I would not have had that open door. It's those publishers have very, very tight gateways. And 2 things happen. Joining SCBWI gives you some routes to get in there, and then also the agent doesn't hurt. Certainly you can do all this without an agent, but since I am a full-time professor, I've got my agent Christy working in the wings, getting my work out there instead of me doing all of the sort of clerical work too. So that's, it is another vehicle. Everybody has a little different path, but that's what mine is. Okay.
Thank you so much to you both. You can hear the real passion in both of your voices. I've got one quick question here. Is the society beneficial to those of us who don't write or illustrate books for children or teens, but we write professional resource books about children's literature and teen literature? Is there a connection through this society that would be helpful for us?
I think being in and around the people that work in that field is essential. You know, it's because I think even perspective on what's being published and what you know your audience is going through in society, pandemic or mental health or whatever, it's good to have your finger on the pulse of that. It helps you be an informed writer. And I think whatever you're writing today, again, we have to be these lifelong learners that adjust. And I think that SCBWI, because it's such a large organization, it offers the resources of knowledge. What do you think, Catherine?
Yep, absolutely. I was going to say, you know, it's just a great resource to be able to keep your finger exactly on the pulse of what's going on in the industry and changing trends, as well as, you know, what's important to young readers, as well as educators and parents. So yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Thank you so much. There are no other questions in the chat, but does anybody have a quick question before we end?
And please reach out to us.
Absolutely.
You know, you can find us. We'd be glad to follow up with anybody too.
Absolutely. I feel like even though we managed to fill an hour here, we still hardly scratch the surface of all the things that SCBWI offers and that you can do with the organization. So yes, it's a wonderful place for sure. And the Ohio Kidlit community, you know, you just can't beat it.
Most supportive people in a professional group I've ever belonged to. I absolutely, yeah, it's so encouraging.
Absolutely. And thank you all so much for, you know, having us today. And thank you to Mazza as well. This has been a lot of fun. And hopefully we'll, you know, get to see some good books from all of you come out someday.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks guys for the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and end this meeting and this recording so that people have enough time to take a break before our next keynote speaker. So thank you again.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.